Welcome, Charlene Aurelia from MMK Advocates. So we can just share how many of us have done tenders before. If you're a new person in the tendering space, some of the challenges you faced, or maybe what would you like to know? Because we have quite a few people joining us. So maybe you can try and get as much insights as possible before we continue with the webinar. So Joy Kemboy from Bomata Enterprises Limited, welcome. So maybe I can just inquire. Charlene, from your organization, have you guys been doing tenders, or this is your first time participating in tenders?
Thank you. We have been doing tenders.
You've been doing tenders. Thank you so much for the feedback. Maybe Jonathan, you can also let us know if you're new in the tendering space or you've already been in the tendering space before.
We've been doing tenders.
Thank you so much for feedback. On another note, as the presentation is getting ready, once the webinar is done, we'll also be able to share with all the participants the presentation and also the live recording for the webinar. So we can also proceed. Maybe Nancy, you can let us know, have you participated in tenders before? I can see for Linetta, it's the first time you're participating in tenders. I can see Kevin Kimani from Vital Kim Essentials is joined us, so welcome. I can also see Peter Ndirangu, it's the first time you're venturing into the tendering space, so welcome. I hope you'll be able to get a lot of insights from the webinar. So as we proceed, I'd like to introduce some of the speakers that we are having for today. So the webinar will be conducted by two of our representatives. We have Lois Ominde, that is a representative from Tenda Soko, who will be taking us through the presentation. She'll introduce herself briefly as we begin later on. And we also have Edward Kihara, who will be able to take us through the Q&A, what you should know, what you should take into consideration when it comes to the technical and financial tender requirements. So if you have any questions or inquiries, you can also have them on the chat box, whereby they'll be able to be covered by Edward. And then we also have Frida, who is joining us, a representative from Tenda Soko. So those who have been using the Tenda Soko platform, and if you have any challenges, we also have representatives from Tenda Soko. So we'll be able to answer all those questions. So I can see we have quite a number of people who it's their first time venturing into tenders. We have Salad, we have Clive Chege, it's their first time venturing. We also have Nick Collins, Muriuki from Collie Ventures. It's also the first time they're venturing into tenders. You're very much welcome to the webinar, and I'm quite hopeful that you'll be able to get a lot from the webinar. We also have Kefa Nyarega. It's also your first time. Joe Sylvester, it's also your first time in tendering. So I hope the webinar will be able to cover majority of the questions that you have, and also mostly the technical part for the technical and financial tender requirements. So I can also see Aisha Hassan from Tanzania. You're working with a Korean engineering company, that is Yushin Engineering Corporation, administrative manager, and it's the first time in the tendering space. Welcome, Aisha. We also have Peter Kibia. It's also your first time. Welcome. The session will majorly cover the technical aspect and the financial aspect of the tender process. So you'll be able to cover all that. So for those venturing into tenders as the first time, you'll be able to get a lot of information that will be able to give you like a head start when it comes to quoting the tender, how you're supposed to do it, all the know-hows in regards to the technical and financial aspect. So as the technical team finishes up setting the presentation, I can see we have quite a number of people who have joined. Maybe you can just share some of the topics that you're hoping to be covered during the presentation, so that we can also have them on the Q&A section to ensure that we cover everything, so that you don't miss out on any information that you would like to receive during the webinar. I can also see Dr. Odhiambo from JMEM Enterprise. It's also your first time in the tendering space. So welcome. I hope the session will be very insightful for you. As I mentioned, we'll be covering mostly the technical and financial aspect of tendering, because we've been getting a lot of inquiries as Tender Soko. You find someone is new in the tendering space. Now, when it comes to quoting for a tender, they wonder like, how should I quote in order for me to be able to get a tender? Should I quote a higher price or a lower price? And all that will be covered during the webinar, as mentioned with our experts that we have Louis and also Edward. And yeah, so I think the screen sharing is almost ready. So thank you so much for the patience that you've had. So I'll just introduce the first speaker who will be taking us through the whole presentation. That is Lois Ominde. She's a Marketing and Communications Officer at Tender Soko. Maybe she can just briefly give us a word before the presentation starts. So Lois.
Okay, thank you so much, Maimuna. Okay, so let's get started on this. So my name is Luis. I'm the Marketing and Communication Officer for Tender Soko. I'll just be taking you through a brief for around 10 minutes before Edward comes in and does the practicals, because we believe when it comes to technical and financials, you're not just required to be talking about it, but you need to have someone on board who is in a position of helping you understand exactly how it is done. So Maimuna had given a brief overview of what Tender Soko is, and majorly these are the two topics we shall be dealing on. We are going to look at the financial capabilities and all the technical requirements. And one thing that you're going to focus on is how can you know whether you can financially handle a project. Also, how can you prove that? And Edward will be giving you a brief overview as well as technically showing you how people do it, and how he has helped other clients be in a position of understanding it. So on the theory bit of it, for you, one thing about financials, you always understand the audited accounts are always a requirement. And we've seen we have so many auditors who've joined the meeting today, and they all understand. And for you to have the audited accounts, you need to have you need to be sure that the audit that you're having was from a qualified auditor that reviewed your finances. Apart from that, you need to be in a position to prove that the firm is recognized, is an auditing firm that is recognized, and also both your stamps for the company's director and also the auditor are supposed to be there. This to ensure that you're confirming validity, and in most instances, they're always in hard copies. Another thing is financial. Where are you getting your finances? Where are you getting your resources? Are you going to the line of credit side where maybe you have a bank that is going to finance your project? Or do you feel you have the enough bank statements or documents that are from the bank that are literally showing that you have the financial capacity of handling the project? Because no organization wants to work with someone who is not in a position of fully delivering their project. They don't want to. They want to always try their level best to work with someone credible who will ease in their work as well as fully deliver. Another thing is the bill of quantities. Bill of quantities literally shows what is required, and this is mostly in the construction sector, whereby you outline the materials. It always has all the details. It's always a very huge document that most of the people who deal with tenders never want to use it, but it's always very essential for you to go through it bit by bit, because the tendering, if you get that the bill of quantities is complex, it means that it's a big project and it requires time, understanding, and everything. And maybe the financing organization, maybe you can get, maybe it is World Bank, KfW, or AFDB, have required you to give a detailed outline so that nobody can miss out on anything. So we always have different categories of bill of quantities. I believe most of you, in some instances, you've been in a position whereby a bill of quantity, whereby an organization, first of all, maybe they want to do a construction, and what happens is they'll ask, first of all, look for a consultant that is going to help them come up with the bill of quantity, a consultant that is going to survey the area, understand what is required, who is going to prepare the tender document. So you get that the bill of quantity is either prepared the quantity survey or engineer, that is literally showing the estimates, so that because this is someone who understands exactly what is required. Also, for the consultants, also they are always picked through a pre-qualification, through a tender exercise, after which you get that now they move to the next step of looking for people who are going to do the construction of, maybe, for example, the construction of maybe the road. You get that maybe a consultant was looked for to help create a layout of exactly what is required, after which you come to the next step, whereby now they go to the next step of looking who are going to do the task, who are going to do the specific work. Another thing is you have bill of quantities that are provided by manufacturers. These are cost based. Now these are for the other services. Maybe an organization is looking for a machine, for a crane equipment, different types of machine. So these, in most instances, are always generated. Then you have bids that are generated by bidders. So as a bidder, you're the one going to create an estimate of exactly what you're going to use and what is literally required based on the market prices and the surveys. As I said, this was going to be very, very short, so that you can have Edward go into the details, so that you can guide you exactly how are you quoting, how are you budgeting, how do you understand the bill of quantities, so that you can be in a clear position of being able to submit a quality bill. So the key takeaways from this session are always that they're going to be on always having proper financial documents, and also how to categorize your bill of quantities. And apart from that, the year is coming to an end. We have organizations that are advertising tenders, and not only public organizations, we have NGOs, parastatals, different organizations. We always say the cake is too big for everyone in the market. So it is up to you as a contractor or supplier to identify where am I suitable, where am I suiting in this market, which piece of cake am I picking, so that you can be in a position of diversifying and moving to the next level. As we always say, we begin baby steps and move to the next level. We've had people who've done tenders for so long and who have perfected the art so well. So as we move into it, I'll get back to Maimuna so that she's in a position of now bringing in Edward, who will have a more longer session. And if you have any question, don't be afraid. Despite the fact that this is our last webinar this year, share all the questions you have. We are here to help you not only get these tenders, but also understand what are other people doing in the market. Because in our previous webinar, we are also advised on what types of tenders should we be going for, what organizations are the best to work for. So now today we just decided to focus on the technical requirements and the financial, because this is a place where most of the suppliers and contractors always get a challenge. You get someone applies for tenders, but because they're not good at quoting, offering the best, they offer the best services, but because they fail at the quoting and the understanding the bill of quantity and what is required, they always tend to lose these opportunities and give up and end up with a normal phrase of it is a know who scheme or something. Yes, that is there, it exists, but you always have instances whereby you're as long as you're eligible. We have organizations and companies that are straightforward, are transparent enough, and they always give tenders to the most qualified bidder. If that could not be the case, we could not be seeing most people participating in these processes. And we have organizations also who have failed in that area, and it's all about trying to see how can we improve in such scenarios, how can we follow up on this and ensure, because it's a whole process. And the moment you understand exactly what happens at what level, you are in a position of moving to the next level and also growing in the market together with the rest. So I'll get back to Maimuna, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Lois. I think most of us have taken key takeaways from it. Now I'll introduce Edward, who is also a tender expert, who will go into detail in regards to the tender quotation and the technical aspect. So maybe I can just introduce Edward so that he can take over. Edward.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Yeah, now clear, now clear.
What about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can be able to get you.
Okay, thank you. As I start on this session, my name, as you heard, is Edward Maina Kehara, a tender expert or a tender specialist. I'm a very experienced person in terms of tenders, that is the requirements of any tender and what is expected of you. As I've seen most of the messages in our message forum, most of the vendors or most of the companies or owners or directors, they are new to this issue. So maybe before I get into detail of our main topic, that is the financial and the technical part, I would like to give a brief introduction on tenders. So I'll start. I've seen people are saying they are new to this. So what basically I usually advise someone before opening a company, if you have a company or it's a business name, is before opening a company, you have to understand the criteria that the criteria or the opportunities that are available or what you're interested in, or the activities that you're interested in participating before opening a company. So let's say, like example, you have opened a company of cleaning services, all, and then all of a sudden you happen to understand that you should not participate in a company that you've already given it its name, maybe a XYZ cleaning company. Then you decide, no, I want to participate in a company that does civil engineering. So basically what I'm trying to say is that when opening a company, before opening a company, you have to make some decision. You'll have to decide to evaluate the opportunities that are available or what is your interest. That means if maybe you want to participate in something that maybe like tenders which revolve about civil works, you have to understand the mandatory or the statutory documents that are required for that particular company. So in a tender, there are basically two main aspects in a tender before agreeing to do any tender. Tenders are mainly grouped into two. There are those that are special tenders, and there are those that are open tenders. As I said in the last meeting, open tenders, they are open to anyone nationwide. And special tenders, those are tenders that are meant for the disadvantaged group in the society or in the nation. Those are types of companies that you can open at a special tender. They include companies that are grouped into women category. Women are normally given priority by the government to participate in tenders. There are those that are meant for the youth. Youth are both men and women. But for youth, for a company to be registered as a youth, in the CR12, the youth must not be beyond 35 years. And there are those that are meant for people with special disability. So if a tender is meant for women and your company doesn't belong to any of those special category, that is open tender, you cannot participate in that tender. That means what? If you happen to participate in that tender, you'll automatically get disqualified. So before doing any tender, the two main aspects before even opening a tender document is understanding your company. Does it belong to special group or to the open group? If it belongs to a special group, there are those special benefits that any institution will guarantee or will offer to those companies that belong to the special groups. That is, there are things that we call the bid securities. That is the bid bonds. You will not be required to provide any of the bid bond if you are participating in a tender that belongs to a special group. If you are participating in a tender that belongs to open group, you will be required to provide the bid bond. The bid bond, this is a type of security which each company is supposed to get it from a financial institution like the insurance companies or the commercial banks. So those are two main categories of a tender. It doesn't mean if your company belongs to a special group, you cannot participate in an open tender. You can participate in either an open or a special group. But if your company is open, you cannot participate in a tender that is special because you'll not be having the required mandatory, that is the AGPO certificate, to participate in the special tender group. So after understanding the two types of or the two main categories of a tender, now we proceed to now getting the real requirements or the detailed requirements of each tender. This one, they normally differ. We normally have what we call the mandatories or the statutory. which include the certificate of incorporation, the PIN certificate of a company, if it is a company. If it is a business name, then you'll need to have or provide a PIN certificate of the individual, that is a person registered under that name. If it is a partnership, then you'll have to provide the PIN certificate for the both of them, for both the partners. So after the PIN, then you'll have to provide the tax compliance. That is a mandatory, that is something that you can check even you as a person or as a director. After the tax compliance, then you'll, if a tender is special, you'll have to incorporate or put what we call the AGPO certificate. And the AGPO certificate, as I said, they are basically for women, youth, and people with people with disability. So after that, then you need to provide an evidence of a business permit or a license. This is a permit that is given by any county government in Kenya to operate activities by your company. So like a county government of Nairobi, yes, that is the best permit to ever choose, because if you happen to pick it today, it will expire next year, a date like today. But if you happen to pick in other counties like Kiambu, if you pick it today, it will expire on 31st of December. So after that, I would normally advise someone to pick a permit from Nairobi. It is expensive, but it will give you more time to do tenders. So after providing the business permit, now those are the major under the statutory. Now, each company will have what we call a list of directors. A list of directors is each of the directors is shown full names and the stipulated amount of shares. So under the CR12, you will have the CR12, just a document, or is called a company search. A document with the list of directors and each of the directors, the amount of shares that each of these directors own. So under the CR12, most of the tenders, they normally advocate that it should not be beyond 6 months since it was acquired. So the CR12, we mean that you are applying for a CR12 or you are doing a tender, it should not be beyond 6 months since you acquired the CR12. After the CR12, now you'll have what we call, you've stated the CR12 contains the list of the electors. Now you'll have what we call those electors, their IDs, the both front and the back part, both put and all certified by an advocate. After providing the director's ID, for all the directors, it's not a must that you can provide if your companies in CR12 indicates that you have what we call secretaries or those other people. You only have to provide IDs for the directors. That one is always a mandatory. After providing the IDs, now you'll have what we call the power of attorney. This one is just to ensure that whoever was signing that document, signing and stamping, was authorized by the director. Even if it is the director himself who is doing the job, it is very necessary, it is very important to always provide the power of attorney and affidavit. The purpose of this, in all these attachments that you are attaching in a document, you'll always certify each and every document. Certify a true copy of the original, because you'll always be providing a copy of the original. So since you are going to certify, it is very important to always provide the power of attorney and affidavit. Now after that, there is always now depending on the tender, there's what we call the personnel or the staffs in the company. And at least you only have to provide, does not necessarily mean that those people are necessarily working in your firm, but it means that if you get the LPO or the award rater, you'll be in a position or you'll have the capability of providing the staffs that are required in a document. Maybe let's say you're being required to provide a personnel like a project manager, who maybe is required to have qualified in a certain degree or certain level of education. Just by providing a certificate and a CV, you provide a certificate which should also be certified. You should also provide a CV. The CV should always be in the format provided in the document. Many people usually provide a CV that belongs to an individual, a personal CV. That is not normally the case. If you do that and you fail to provide the CV in the format provided in the document, you'll automatically get disqualified. Institution like KPC, they'll not even look at your documents. Institution like Nairobi Hospital, they'll not check at your document if you have not fulfilled some of those simple things like the CV. You should provide the CV in the required format in the document. After the CV, now we go to the experience of your company. If you are doing a general supply of maybe, I had seen there were tenders of supplies brands, that is a national treasury. If you are doing a tender or a framework on supply of meat or maybe supply of fruits, you need to show that your company had done such job area. If your company had not done such job and you fail to provide, most likely it is just like applying a job. If you want a big position, you'll have to go and provide them with your experiences where you've worked before. So you'll need some references and some recommendation letters to prove that your companies have ever done such a job and sometimes back. So for new companies, what happens? I usually advise people to do the following. If your company, maybe it's 6 months or okay, between 1 and 6 months in between the date of incorporation. Doing a tender under this new registration period, it is not easy to get a tender unless it is somehow that you are conversant with. So what happens under such situation? To qualify or get some simple jobs, there are things that a company usually advise the directors to always advocate for. So in a tender is always a detailed thing that is maybe above 5 million, depending on institution, or above 10 million now, henceforth, or maybe between 10 to, let me say 10 plus million and above. So what happens if a company belongs to 1 and 6 months? It doesn't mean that you cannot do any tender. There is what we call pre-qualifications. Pre-qualifications, they are documents that are easier and simple. This one, even if your company is 1 month old, you can participate in these pre-qualifications. What happens in pre-qualifications? Any institution or any procuring entity will always provide you a list of very many categories of items that they wish to be supplied for. What happens? The reason they provide a very long list is that under pre-qualification, if you get pre-qualified, what happens? You are normally given what we call an LFQ. An LFQ is just a simple tender, just like a tender, but just a simple one. The difference between an LFQ and a tender is that in an LFQ, the budget is always, maybe depending on institution, there's always between 0.5 million and even 500,000. It's just below that. It is not like a tender. A tender is a huge one with huge figures. So if your company is new and you are interested in doing tenders, doesn't mean you cannot participate. You can always participate, and what I usually advocate for, that is pre-qualification. If you get pre-qualified by any institution, what happens normally if that institution gets the needs of getting the services that you personally say that you would have provided, they will always write for you an LFQ, and then you are required to quote. And then after, you can be considered for the LFQ, and you can be awarded an LPO. So for experiences, as I've said, for those companies that are participating in tenders and maybe 1 year and above, they need to provide experiences. Experiences also varies. There are those institutions that most of them, almost 90%, in an experiences, they are usually classified. There is what we call an award letter. This is a letter that any company, if you are awarded an LPO, that you will receive. If you get an award letter, there is what now we call a signing of the contract. There is always a documentation for all this. If you get an award letter, it will stipulate the amount of the tender that you've been awarded, the date of signing the tender, the signing not the tender, the contract. So after the signing of the contract, now it is the execution of the job. In the execution of the job, if you happen to complete it under the stipulated terms and conditions in the contract, you'll be awarded what we call a completion letter. A completion letter is the same as a letter of discharge. If you get the letter of discharge, it is always advisable as a company director or as a company secretary to always request for what we call the recommendation letter or a reference letter from this particular institution that had awarded you the same tender. So that is for companies that wish to participate in tenders and are above 1 year. So after experiences, depending on a tender, there are those tenders that will require you to provide what we call equipment. These are their vessels to help you facilitate the contract. This is definitely depends on a tender. If a tender will require you to move a product A to product B, a product A from point A to point B, then you'll be required to provide an evidence of moving equipment. An example, if you happen to participate in a tender of general supply, maybe of fruits, of processed food, of processed, everything, mention it. You may be required to provide what we call an evidence that you can be in a position to move this product from maybe the manufacturer or your supplier to this required point. So what happens in other equipment, a company, definitely not all companies will be having this evidence, like evidence of a logbook. So what happens if you have a logbook of another company or another friend, okay, or a logbook that doesn't belong to a company or is not indicated the ownership belonging to the one of the director. So what happens at that situation, you will be required to provide what we call a lease agreement. A lease agreement. A lease agreement is just an agreement between you and the owner of the logbook, which doesn't belong to you, indicating that you've been leasing, or you can lease the equipment in case it's needed for a certain period of time and some conditions there. So you can provide that. You can provide the lease letter, and you must show the proof of that logbook. So you provide the lease agreement and also the logbook for that particular item. But to ease this, there is always what we call the Ministry of Transport, which is located in Australia. If you maybe need more equipment than you can provide using other means, like friends or other companies that are surrounding you, you can always happen to just go to the Ministry of Transport in Machakos Road, and you can get a list letter, which you can be using to do tenders. Because at the ministry, they have a lot of transport equipment, pickups, everything. So you can always use that as a source of equipment. Now, I did have to pass through that way because of the very many people I saw saying they were new to these things. Now, before getting to what we are required to handle today. And that is the technical and financial aspect of a tender. So, depending on a tender, all tenders are so different. And the tenders that are so serious on the technical and financial part, there are those tenders that the civil works. The civil works tenders, those are people that does construction, people that are involved in these mechanical things. Yeah, I mean like road works, like building and construction, such things. But for financial, that is mandatory for 90% of the tenders that are normally published in Kenya. So under the financial part, there are those institutions that financial. There are those institutions that will always require that for a certain company or a certain business name to prove that it can handle or it has the financial capacity to handle a certain job. Because when you can win a tender, if you put all the requirements and you fail to provide the financial requirement, this institution will not understand how you maneuver or you will handle the job. So most of the institutions, they will usually request they will request you to prove that you have financial capacity to handle this job. And the financial capacity, we normally prove that to any firm that you can get a letter of credit from financial institution. At a financial institution, we can talk about can get a letter of credit or a line of credit from maybe a microfinance bank, from maybe a commercial bank. It's just a letter indicating that to whomever it may concern, this company registered under this name, maybe we shall provide them with a line of credit of maybe 50 million for this particular period of time. So most of them, there are those that are specific to a tender, and there are those that are open to any tender. So I usually advise anyone to go, unless the tender instructs, you go for a line of credit that is open to any tender. Because you can use that line of credit to do any tender. You can prove that you have the financial resources for like 6 months using the same line of credit. You just have to put the original and you'll be doing a copy. So you'll be using this copy to show the institution you are doing or you're participating in a tender that you have that capacity to provide the financial obligation. So under the line of credit also, that one is from bank. We have what we call the bank statements. Bank statements, many of the bidders fails in this when providing the bank statements. Bank statements without the stamp from the bank, those are not bank statements. Just like just providing some few statements there without a proof of where the source are. So for a company to be seen, as valid to participate in a certain tender, you will have to provide what we call certified bank statements. This means what? If you have the bank statements in soft copy, you will have to go and get the stamp from the bank. They get certified and stamped. So for bank statements, anyone providing a bank statement to participate in a tender, you should always ensure that they are all certified by the bank, by the official stamp from the bank. So that is the bank statements. And the bank statements, there are those tenders that will request you to provide bank statements for even 3 years or 2 years. So it is upon the person who is handling the tender to ensure that he understands all the particulars or all the requirements of the bank statements that are required. If it is for 3 months, ensure that carefully you've provided bank statements for 3 or even above, but not less than 3. Because if you do that, even having done all the job, you will fail or you will be disqualified. At the bank statement, now we move next to, this one will depend on institutions. There are those institutions that will want you to provide what we call title deeds. Title deeds, this means what? This institution, like we normally say that we can use the title to get some loans or something. So for like the KWS will always require, that is a Kenya Wildlife, will always require you to provide a title deed in any of their tenders. So this means that they want assurance that if you happen to win a tender, or upon being awarded a tender, will you be in a position to provide or to handle the tender? Can you get some extra money if you are delayed in payment to handle the job? So the financial, those are the most serious things that you should always provide. Now we go to the bank statement, the audited accounts, sorry. At the audited accounts, if the company is new, like I saw many people saying that most of the companies are new, you are required to provide what we call, if it is less than 1 month, because for a full audited account, it should be for a period of 1 year or for a period of an year. So if it is less than 1 year, most of the audited accounts, or most of the tenders or institution will always request that you may provide what we call management accounts. These are things that they can be prepared by an auditor, and they will be showing your financial position as that particular time. So for the audited accounts, as said earlier, most of the tenders will require you to provide a 3 years audited account. Depending on an institution, if your company is 2 years old and a tender requires 3 years audited account, depending on the institution, you can fail if you provide the audited account for 2 years. This is based on the year of incorporation, the year that your company was incorporated, and the years and the tender requires you to provide an audited account for 3 years. So I will not most likely promise someone to participate in such a tender, because I've seen very many people, very many bidders fail, because you are required to provide an audited account of 3 years, now based on your company, because it was incorporated 2 years ago, now you provide audited account for 2 years. So it is obvious, very important to provide the audited accounts that have been detailed in the tender. And the audited account, they differ also. Someone participating in general supply and someone participating in an NCA1, that is roadworks, they can't have the same audited account. So they differ because of what? There's what we call average turnover. Average turnover, this is what happens at average turnover. A tender will always indicate that for you to participate in a certain job, you will have to provide or to show proof of having an average sale per year of about 10 million, of about 100 million. So it is upon you as a bidder to understand very clearly what the tenders that you are participating in require you or require the average sales or turnover per year to be. Let's say like you are required to provide an audited account of an average turnover of 100 million the last 3 years. This is what happens. For you to get this 100 million, you'll have to add all the turnover, all the sales for the 3 years. Then you divide by 3. If you get something that is less than 100 million, then you cannot participate in that unless you adjust your audited account. If you get something that is above now 100 or 100 and above, now you can participate in that tender. And in that situation, you will not be disqualified to participate in that tender. So also audited accounts in terms of the turnover, as I've said earlier, they normally differ. There are those tenders that will require you to provide an average turnover of maybe 8 million. I don't think it will make any sense if you provide an audited account with an average, if you're participating in a tender of maybe a budget of 8 million, and you are required to provide audited accounts, which on an average of a turnover 8 million or 10 million and above, then you participate the same tender with a company that has an average turnover of 100 million. It will not make sense at all. So you'll be required to provide audited accounts that are within this range. You can provide 15 million, even 20 million, but you cannot provide maybe 100 million, 150 million, or even 1 billion, as I've seen in different cases. So, as I've said that about the audited accounts, now let's go to their preparation. Under preparing the audited accounts, there are factors that are considered. For them to be legit, there are things that should be considered. The consistency in terms of the years, as I was saying, the profit that was made maybe in 2021, 2022, 2023, are they liming? The turnover, are they liming? All these issues, they should be liming. They should not be seen things that they don't belong to the same company. So at that situation, these audited accounts, they should be prepared in a manner such that they are all stamped. This is a very serious thing. They are all stamped by the auditor. The auditor's stamp, or even the auditor. You can give you the stamp or she, you can stamp them. And this stamp, it should be indicating what we call the auditor's practicing number. They should be indicating the auditor's practicing number. Also, under the auditor's details, we should be in a position to provide a license. That is the individual license of the auditor and also the license of the firm that the auditors operates within. So you should be in a position to provide the two details, the auditor's license and the firm license. They should be all be updated, because these are things that I'll scan. These are things that you can be in a position to verify if they are up to date in an online situation. Also, you will need to provide you need also to stamp the document using the company's stamp. The company's stamp. This means that if the audited accounts are stamped using the company stamp, you should also be bearing the director's signature in all the pages, and that is mandatory. So as far as audited accounts are concerned, I've said you should provide the auditor's license, the auditor's practicing the auditor's license, the auditor's practicing firm license, the auditor's practicing number. All the auditors should be stamped in all pages by both the auditor and the director, both signed and stamped. Then now we can, that is much more about the audited accounts. Also based on a tender, you can also be required to provide what we call cash flow projections. And the cash flow projections, this one is based on a tender. Mostly this one belongs to those people who participate in civil works. This one is also prepared by the auditor. You can provide the cash flows projection, indicating how the firm projects to handle the job, how the firm projects its cash towards the project. Yeah, that is much more about the financial. We've covered about the letter of credit, the bank statements, title deed, and the audited accounts, cash flows projections, and the details about the auditor. Now let's go to the bill of quantity. As many have known, under the bill of quantities, also these are based on a tender. There are those tenders that will require anyone or the one who is participating in those tenders to personally quote about the items that are required in a tender. You realize in every tender, other than if it is a tender, you will be required to provide the pricing part of of the items that you are interested in. Let's say an example is a tender of a general supply, and you wish to handle this tender, and maybe you are dealing with what we call fresh vegetables. Now, quoting this or pricing this is something that you can get information either by you personally, if you happen to be familiar with the same, or you can use the market survey. This means that this is an item that you can go to the market today and get the budget of it and get the unit cost of this item. So if you get the unit cost, then it is upon you now to come and decide the percentage profit that you want. That is the markup that you are interested in. So under the bill of quantities, there are those tenders that will also require you to provide the pricing based on where you are getting the product. An example, you can be required to provide mechanical items like maybe you can be requested to provide what we call a microseparometer for those who knows or who participate in KPC tenders. So this item is not produced or manufactured in Kenya. What we're required to do under this situation is one thing. First, you will have to get the original manufacturers of these items. So under this, the manufacturer, since the product is not manufactured in Kenya, is required to provide some few items, as I mentioned in this part of the technical part of our tender requirements. So there's what we call the manufacturer's details. This one means that if the manufacturer is sure the specification that the bidder has provided to him meets the criteria of what he or she has in the store, then he should be in a position to provide what we call the manufacturer's authorization based on a tender. This one applies to mechanical, most parts, mechanical tenders. So if the manufacturer will provide the manufacturer's authorization, when we come to the bill of quantities, it is him personally who will ensure that he has given you the prices of these items. So he's the one who will give you the quotes. When he gives you the quotes, you as a manufacturer, you as a bidder, now you will have to do your markup using this original quote. Based on the factors that this item is not produced in Kenya, then you have to consider things like the currency, the exchange rate, the cost of importing, the tax, all these things, the VAT, and such consideration. So under the bill of quantities, you said there are those prices, there are those items that you can get their prices in a very simple manner. That is using the market service or using the information the perfect information that you have concerning the market. Also, you can, as I said, depending on a tender, you can use the prices from the manufacturers or the producer of that item. They can be locally or they can be globally. So then there are those tenders that will require you to use what we call rates. Under those tenders, we have those tenders that belongs to the civil works tenders, like the roads, the buildings. This one will require, this one will always require you to use what we call a quantity surveyor to give you rates. A quantity surveyor, an engineer, they can also be in a position to do this rates. They understand them more better, because if you talk about roads, there's what we call things like grading and graveling. These are rates that are normally constant based on the currency on the current economic policies. So under those bill of quantities that you'll be required to provide the rates, it's normally obvious and very important to always use a very specialized person who has done quantity surveyors or engineers who are more specialized in this late. So at the bill of quantities, there are those, as I've said, there are those items that you can get their prices from the market service, from the manufacturers, and also from the specialized partners like the quantity surveyors and the engineers. So now, under the bill of quantities, these quantity surveyors or the engineers, if you happen to use them, or if they are the ones who are providing you with the rates, this happens to those people who are participating in civil works. They should be in a position to provide you with the following. They should provide you with the rates and the total amount. They should also be in a position to always provide the percentage markup based on the budget of the project, because most of the civil works tenders will always provide the budget. So they should be in a position to provide the percentage of the markup. They should also be in a position to provide what we call the methodologies, and this one is just a stipulated program of how the methods that you're going to do the project. If you talk about how do you handle people, how you handle gender violence, how you handle things like poor loads, how will you ensure the materials get into the required destination. So at the methodology, then we also have what we call work program. Now this one is program of work. Let's say now you've won the job, you've been awarded the job. You'll have to provide each activities stipulated in each time frame that you will use to finish that particular activities. If it is like a building, the time here that you'll use for creating the foundation, you should provide a timely in terms of month and all the activities that will be covered in that particular time. So also under the methodology, we'll also provide you with something that we call organization chart. This is not normally a mandatory, but it is always important to provide a schedule of how your company will always or has been having its structure of organization organized. At that, we shall also look at, I shall also give a brief description on how to handle a tender at its finishing stage. Now, let's say you finished doing a tender. That is filling inside the document, data filling, signing and stamping every page. Now, and you have attached the document. You will be required to provide or to show all these requirements that were provided, that you are required to provide. Now you are required to you should always show your neatness in handling the document by providing things like we call separators to show that you've put the mandatories, they are here from this page maybe to this page. After that, you've done the CR12, the director's IDs, the power of attorney, they are separated with this separator. The experiences, the personnel, the equipment, all those requirements that were required in a tender. It is very important to put the separators on each of them. After putting the separators, it is very important. It is very good to always certify your copies of the original. That is, all the attached copies. It is always good to certify them with a certificate, a stamp from the auditor, showing that this one is always a true copy of the original. So now, even after you've satisfied, it is not always good to always certify everything. There are those certificates that are always a copy of the original. So we just certify the copies of the original. For those items or for those documents that you personally as a bidder, you've composed them and they are part of your documents or you are part of your attachments, you should always stamp them with a company stamp and you will not certify them as a true copy because you have prepared them as a bidder. So after you've satisfied the document and stamped all the document, now it is always very important during your final stages. Now you counter check the document. Have I put everything? Have I fulfilled all the requirements of a tender? Because a tender is always like an exam. Have I attained an 100% marks? Have I attained the required marks? If you are missing one of the requirements, maybe you are missing one of the technical. If you are told maybe to provide 4 experiences and you only have 2, there are marks that you lose there. Based on that, based on the fact that you lose those marks, do I have am I meeting the rest of the requirements? Are they meeting the criteria that is required in the document? Am I meeting the target of the marks? So after that, after ensuring that you've really put everything in the document, now it is the time now you can now serialize the document. After confirming that you've put everything, this one is normally the last part of the grading, because if you happen to serialize and then happen that you skipped something and you need to add it, the serialization should be always automatic. You should not confuse them. They should, if it is 1 to 500, it should be a continuous process. If you fail on this, you'll always be disqualified if it is noticed based on the institution. So after you have serialized the document, then the mode of binding. The documents, very many documents will always provide you with the means that they need you to provide to bind your document. This is, you can put covers on both the front page and the last page, and then you can maybe use tape bound to bind your document. After binding, now before you also before you bind, by the way, I forgot, you need to understand the mode of submission of this document. Does the procuring entity require the documents to be in 2 copies, or in 1 copy, or in soft copy? If it requires 8 to be in copies, then you need to after you have serialized, then you need to get a copy of that original document. And now it should also be separate from the original. Now, does it require a soft copy? If it requires a soft copy, in which method am I going to submit this document? Are you going to submit this document in form using IFMIS portal? There are different forms of submitting a document online. You can use IFMIS portal depending on the institution. Like most of the county government usually use IFMIS portal. Like the country government of Taita Taveta or Kiambu, they usually use IFMIS portal. So have you fulfilled that requirement? Have you checked the mode of submission of that document? If you have fulfilled that mode of the submission method, then you can get your copies, you can get your scanned copy, and then after that, now you can bind your documents, both the copies and the original, if you are required to provide the copies. You can bind them, that is step bound. Then after that, what you are normally, what also is very important also to check is the time of submission. That is, you should always check before starting a tender, the date and time of submission. So now you just put your documents in a bahasha, you label it very clearly, then the document is ready for submission. Maybe I can talk a few things about the bid bond as I indicated. Also, at the bid bond, it is very important. These are things I have seen many people doing, and they usually disqualify them. In provision of a bid bond, there are very two critical instructions that very many people fail to understand. One, you should understand the source of this bid bond. there are those tenders that will not discriminate a bidder. They will require you to do the bid bond from either the insurance company, any microfinance, or a commercial banks. Commercial banks include banks like Equity, these big banks, family banks, those. Microfinance, we have Smith, Rafiki, those. We have the insurance, there are very many insurance banks. So if a tender requires you to provide a billboard from commercial bank, then it should be strictly from a commercial bank. If it is from a microfinance, or it is not restricted to a commercial bank, that is, you can use any bank or a financial institution or insurance company. And in that situation, then it is always important to go for this financial institution. Also, as I was handling the bid bond, I'll also talk something small about the AGPO. If you are handling a tender that requires you to provide the AGPO, as I said, for those people who are special groups, you will not provide the bid bond, but instead you will fill what we call the tender securing declaration. In filling a tender securing declaration, there is a format, there's always a format. So it is upon everybody to always understand, because we should educate the validity. There is always a format of a tender securing declaration that is provided in the document. So you should fill that. So I guess I'm now done with my presentation, unless anyone has any question. Lois?
Thank you so much, Edward, for that insightful presentation. I think most of the participants were able to get a lot of insights on the financial and technical bit of tendering. So maybe we can move to the next session, which is the Q&A section. So I can see Naomi Njuki, you had a question on AGPO, how to obtain an AGPO certificate. For instance, when asked to provide financial statements and your company is still small and have no financial muscle, how or where can one obtain financial support to enable the person participate in tendering? So I think maybe I can be able to cover the AGPO part so that Edward will be able to cover the financial part of the question. Now, in acquiring the AGPO certificate, what you need to do is to apply through the AGPO online portal, which is agpo.go.ke, whereby you need to register your company, whereby you need to have all the relevant documents, and some of the documents that you'll be able to, or which are needed for you to apply for an AGPO certificate, include the business registration certificate or the certificate of incorporation, and the CR12 for your company. And also among the documents that are required are also the TCC. Now, once you're able to key in your organization details, you'll be able to receive an email for you to activate your email, and then you can be able to log into the AGPO system. And then after a while, when they review, you'll be able to receive your AGPO certificate. I think that answers your question, Naomi. Now, before we proceed to the financial parts, which Edward will be covering for the question, there was another question from, we also have another question from Joy. Are all pages required to be signed and stamped by the director, or where are they required to sign alone? So I think Edward had already covered this, explaining that all the pages are required to be signed by the director. So it's not necessarily a single page. So all the pages are required to be signed by the director. So maybe the last part of the question which Naomi had was if your company is still small and you have no financial muscle, how or where can one obtain financial support? So I think Edward, you can pick up on that question. That is how and where you can obtain financial support to participate in tendering.
Thank you for that question. What happens, depending on an institution, mostly the government parastatals, like the CBK, let me just give an example. They usually give what we call an advance payment before you start a job. This one will not normally happen when you are participating in a tender that is from the county government of any part in this Kenya. So under that situation, if you totally are not in a position to have the financial capacity to handle a tender, what I've seen very many people do, and if the institution is not favoring you at all, it requires you to maybe handle a certain percentage of the job so that you can be in a position to get the advance payment. So in that situation, it's normally advisable to seek. There are very many financial institutions, the micro financial institution that usually help individuals or a company to handle a tender if they are not in a position to provide the financial support in participating in that tender. But what happens in that situation, you will have to sign a contract because it will be based on some agreements. There are those that will tell you that I will need certain percentage. Those that will tell you we can talk. Then after if we finish the job, we can talk about the profit and maybe we can share. We can do this assigned contract on behalf on a lawyer. But there are those financial institutions like the SMEP. The SMEP is a very good financial institution that I've seen helping very many people in participating in this tender. So, but what will happen in general, if you happen to get a loan to
Okay, as we finish up, you can share some of the questions that you have on the chat box. So we have one more question that is when quoting for a tender, what are some of the factors one should consider? That is in terms of the price and the quality.
Pardon your question, please.
So we have a question when quoting for a tender, what are some of the factors one should consider?
Yeah.
That is the price or the quality.
Okay. In a tender, most of the tenders will always provide the specification of these products that you are required to supply. So if you are provided with a specification, maybe so what will happen
Okay, so the next question, we have a question from Hassan. Can you win a tender if your company has been making losses as indicated on the audited accounts, but has ticked all other boxes sufficiently? So, Edward, sorry to interrupt. Someone is saying you're not audible. Edward, are you still on mute?
Okay, can you hear me right away?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. As I was saying, if your company, let's say, has not been making profit, this is what happens in tenders. You can always request an auditor to prepare for you audited accounts that are positive and are favorable to your company. Let's say, because personally, what would not make sense is that if you're having audited accounts that are negative, personally, what I think about that, because I've seen it, definitely your bid will not go through. So it is always advisable, because these are things that any procuring entity will not come to your company to confirm about the audited accounts. They just want to see, have you fulfilled what you required about the audited accounts? So according to me, my advice would be to the bidder, you can use other audited accounts. You just get them prepared. They tally with what the tender requirement is requesting, and you can participate in that tender. I don't think a farm by making losses can prevent you from winning a tender. You just have to fulfill the requirements. Like the audited accounts, they can be prepared by an auditor at any time. You just have to agree. This tender requires this turnover. I need this audited account to be having this turnover for me to participate in this tender. And the procuring entity will always consider whether you met the requirements that they provided. Yes.
Okay, I think we can check the last two questions. So we have one from Nicholas. Let's say one registered a business name in 2020 and later converted it into a limited company in 2022. Is it safe to say that the company is 4 years old in terms of experience?
Yes, this is a very good question. What happens under that situation? It is always advisable to say that your company is 4 years, but you must prove, you must show an evidence. So when putting the statutory, what we are talking about, the certificate of incorporation, before the certificate of incorporation, you should have put what we